All right, let's get into it. Today, we are diving deep into the pages of John Grisham's latest legal thriller, The Widow. And let me tell you, it's got all the classic ingredients: a lawyer who's really down on his luck, a client who is just shrouded in mystery, and a case that very quickly spirals into a fight for his own life. You know, at the core of every great thriller, there's always that one moment, that one thing that just changes everything. And in this story, it's not a person who walks through the door. It's not some smoking gun piece of evidence. It's a number, a huge, life-altering number. $16 million. That is the absolutely staggering amount of money that kicks this whole story into overdrive. And you gotta understand, this isn't just a potential payday. It's a number big enough to solve every single problem our main character has, or, create a whole universe of new ones. And there it is. That's the bombshell, dropped by the client herself, an elderly widow named Eleanor Nettie Barnett. And the way she says it is so casual, almost like she's talking about the weather. But for the lawyer sitting across from her, well, that's the sound of his entire world tilting on its axis. Okay, so let's really break this down. Because to get why this is such a big deal, you have to understand the guy who gets this completely unbelievable offer dropped right in his lap. So, this is basically Simon Lotch's life in a nutshell. Over on one side, you have his reality. The man is buried under a mortgage, he's got gambling debts coming after him, and his marriage has totally imploded. And on the other side, the impossible dream that Nettie's fortune is dangling in front of him. Millions in stocks, no debts, total financial freedom. It's a lifeline. And this is her, the woman at the very center of this whole storm, Nettie Barnett. She lives this quiet, frugal life. I mean, she drives an old car, lives in a modest house, counts every penny. So the big question is, how on earth could this woman be sitting on a fortune in Coca-Cola and Walmart stock? It's the very first crack in the story, and Simon is about to fall right through it. So what starts out as this dream, once-in-a-lifetime case, well, it very quickly starts to feel more like a nightmare. The whole simple story just begins to unravel. And the red flags just start popping up everywhere, fast. For one, Nettie's driving is an absolute menace. Then, whenever Simon asks for specifics about her finances, the details get all vague and her story keeps changing. And then her stepson Clyde shows up, this thuggish guy who brutally attacks another lawyer. Nothing is adding up. The story she told and the reality Simon is seeing are miles apart. And this leads us to the one question that Simon just can't shake, and honestly, we can't either. Is Nettie just a lonely old woman who's made this all up for attention, a complete fantasy? Or is she actually telling the truth, and all this weirdness is just an elaborate act to hide her massive fortune from everyone? Just when Simon thinks his biggest problem is figuring out if the money is even real, the stakes get raised in the most terrifying way you can imagine. Suddenly, the mystery of the fortune doesn't matter anymore. Now, it's a fight for his own freedom. And look at how fast his world completely collapses. Day one, Nettie gets into a car crash. A couple days later, trying to protect her, Simon gets her to sign over power of attorney. A week after that, she dies in the hospital. And then, the final blow. The autopsy comes back and it wasn't pneumonia. It was thallium poisoning. And the very next day, Simon is arrested. And here's the thing. The prosecution story is simple, clean, and absolutely devastating. Why did Simon kill her? The motive is obvious, right? Greed. They paint this picture of a lawyer drowning in debt who saw his chance, got greedy, and murdered an old woman to get his hands on her fortune. And that's a story a jury can easily believe. And this quote, man, it just perfectly captures Simon's new reality. He's gone from chasing a multi-million-dollar dream to facing the very real possibility of spending the rest of his life in a prison cell. He's terrified and he is totally alone. But this is a John Grisham novel, so you know the fight is far from over. From inside his jail cell, Simon and his small team start this desperate search for the truth, trying to figure out what really happened to Nettie Barnett. The first real break in the case doesn't come from some brilliant lawyerly move. It comes from a hospital nurse. She remembers seeing an X-ray tech named Oscar Kofi in Nettie's room right around the time she died, a technician who had absolutely no business being there. And when they start digging into this guy Kofi's past, what they uncover is it's a jaw-dropping corporate conspiracy. Turns out, years earlier, he was the main suspect in another patient's poisoning at a different hospital. But instead of calling the police, that hospital, Fenimar Health, chose to protect its reputation. They paid a secret $50 million settlement, made everyone sign an NDA to bury the crime, and then just quietly fired Kofi, letting a serial poisoner walk free to go get another job and kill again. So this incredible discovery, it changes everything. It's not just about defending Simon anymore. It's about exposing a massive, deadly cover-up and finally bringing the real killer to justice. The one person who can blow this whole conspiracy wide open is a guy named Alan Teal. He was one of the lawyers who worked on that original secret settlement, and for years, his conscience has been eating him alive. When he hears about what's happening to Simon, he knows he just can't stay quiet any longer. He decides to risk his entire career to come forward. And Teal's testimony is the final domino. In a closed hearing, he just hands over the entire secret case file. With that evidence, the FBI raids Oscar Kofi's apartment. And what do they find? A stash of poisons, including thallium. And just like that, the prosecution's perfect case against Simon Lach completely evaporates. And with the truth finally out in the open, Simon Lach, the lawyer who went from chasing a fortune to facing a life sentence, is declared an innocent man. So, in the end, we're left with this one question that really echoes through the whole book. From Nettie's wild story about her fortune to the massive corporate cover-up that almost sent an innocent man to prison, it all comes down to this. When a lie is big enough, who's the one that ends up paying the price?